Jane English. What do grown children owe their parents? Ethics. The ethical problem that is being assessed by Jane English, she counters the idea of anything being owed to parents. Although it isn't totally rejected, because there are moral obligations that can be considered when looking at what is owed. For example, Jane English writes, quote, I will argue that it is inappropriate and misleading to describe them as things owed. Page 1. English goes on to refute any stance where a debt is to be paid or some obligation is to be had by being raised by parents. A key quote from the article by Jane English, when English writes, quote, it is sometimes difficult to distinguish between favors and non-favors, unquote, page 2, this creates a layout for the argument. What's the line that distinguishes owing someone and simply being kind? A deeper meaning of the quote. Different situations can arise, some being actions that create a debt, others being gestures that imply a growing friendship or camaraderie. For example, things that would require an owing of someone or maybe a debt to be paid. Owing someone money for a job that was done that required payment, like mowing a lawn, like she said, possibly raking leaves or taking someone's trash out once a week for a weekly payment. Maybe owing a favor to someone that helped you in a risky situation with terms before they helped, like, if I help you, then you must do this. That is something that will create a debt, maybe an obligation that you need to fulfill. Now, ones that are not owing, but simply have a relationship of give and take, that you can give if you'd like or not. It depends on what you feel. A neighbor mowed his friend's lawn out of the blue, expecting nothing in return. That is something that the neighbor can give back or do nothing about. Nothing is owed. Your partner bought dinner and expects to watch a movie that night with you for fun. It may be expected, but it's not required. Your partner brought you to dinner and wanted to go to the movies, but did not hold that up to you. A non-favor and a favor could seem indistinguishable, but they are inherently different when justifying some sort of debt or obligation. What tools did the author use to convey their ethical argument? English used many examples comparing situations that could be related to owing someone. For example, when English uses the circumstance of mowing a neighbor's lawn, where, quote, Max is new to the neighborhood, from page 1. English uses that to present different situations. When Max asks his neighbor to take his mail every week while on vacation, and the neighbor asks him for the same, a debt is owed. In contrast, if the neighbor had taken his mail in for him with no hint or verbal communication for something in return, there is no debt. While the neighbor could give something back to that neighbor, it's not required. Maybe morally he would feel it to be necessary, but it's not required, it's not owed, there's no debt. More into the tools that she used. When English describes these situations, it becomes clear that there's a difference between owing and simply building a relationship. Having some sort of relationship with parents as a child, where everything they do for you is increasing some sort of debt, seems parasitic and unjust. English makes it clear that grown children do not owe their parents a single thing, but simply building a loving relationship, giving and taking mutually, is what's expected. English does a great job of conveying the point that nothing is owed but only morally suggested, like a burden that you only place on yourself is not truly deserved. You put that burden on yourself. Nobody expects you to do anything or requires you to do anything. You put that moral obligation on yourself if you decide to do that. Arguments in favor of the ethical issue. Many agree with English's perspective on the idea of owing parents once you've grown. Some of the reasons for that are, it was the parent's choice to raise the child. In this situation, every parent has a child on their own accord. The child did not ask to be born, so why place a debt on that child when you raise him on your own accord? Child-parent friendship based on mutual love should not incur debt to one person or another. The parent shouldn't feel indebted if the child gets hurt, but is obligated to fix them. Same with the child. If something happens where a parent must fix a bike that the child broke or do something of that sort, the child shouldn't feel indebted to the parent because they are growing and the parent is raising them to be a person that respects objects or can repay debts. It's not required because they are raising them. That is just what happens in life. Children should be free to act with autonomy once they are grown, not chained to their parents after adulthood begins. If a parent grows old and requires care, the child is morally obligated to, but isn't required to help their parent. They should not be chained to that parent. Giving children a burden could deteriorate the quality of their future. Maybe stopping them from moving out of the country to pursue a job, some other restriction that would deteriorate their quality of life. Having the child be owing their parent is never a good situation for them or their future. A scholar in favor of the issue, Hugh Lafayette, is an academic philosopher whose work spans several areas of applied ethics, including bioethics, environmental ethics, and familial ethics. In his article, quote, Licensing Parents, 1980, Lafayette argues for the controversial idea that as we require licenses for potentially harmful activities like driving or practicing medicine, we should also require licensing for parenting. Lafayette has a strong opinion on children's independence after adulthood, just as English does, prioritizing freedom from the parents. He has also authored and edited several influential books in philosophy, including The Practice of Ethics and Ethics in Practicing, an anthology. These works cover a wide range of ethical issues and demonstrate his commitment to applying philosophical rigor to practical problems. Showing his expertise in familial ethics creates a good amount of trust in his work. Arguments against the ethical issue. There are also many arguments against English's perspective on children's obligation to their own parents once they've grown. Since parents invest significant time, resources, and love into raising their children, it is morally appropriate for children to reciprocate when their parents need care and support. Fulfilling duties towards parents can be seen as part of a moral development and character building. These arguments have to do with the development of the child or some obligation to the parent since the parents gave so much. These are against English's argument where you do not owe your parents anything because they are expected to raise you. An expert on this ethical issue, contrasting English's perspective, is Jeffrey Bluestein. He is a professor and a philosopher known for his work in bioethics, medical ethics, and philosophy of family specifically. He believed that children had special obligations to their parents. As a parent becomes more dependent, it is the children's responsibility to protect and care for them. These are his general ideas of what a child should have as their obligations. Jeffrey Bluestein had several works, including Parents and Children, The Ethics of Family. In this work, Bluestein examines the ethical dimensions of parent-child relationships, focusing on the special obligations and moral duties that arise within families, specifically the children themselves. Another work, Care and Commitment, taking the personal point of view. This book explores the ethics of care and personal commitments that shape our moral lives, including those within family relationships. And then, The Moral Demands of Memory. Bluestein discusses the ethical significance of memory and its role in shaping our moral obligations, including those to family members. All of his work and his general ideas revolve around the child being obligated and being developed on the idea that they owe their parents and are being raised by their parents to be successful, and not to be successful, but to give back to their parents, because it is an obligation to them for all the parents have done for them. Most ethically persuasive argument is English's argument. Children should not have any strict obligations or any debt to pay once they come of age and leave the household, or in any other time of childhood. They should not feel the weight of any obligation. They did not take on that obligation. It was their parents that raised them. An explanation into which ethical argument was the most persuasive is, from the professionals and philosophers that dive into the issue of what is owed to a parent from a grown child, the best argument is held in what is morally right compared to what is required. While it may be argued that it is morally wrong to not give back to parents, it's never required to give back to them. It's not necessary, because it was the parents' decision to raise a child, and they should not expect a return on their investment. A return on their investment that they gave to their children, leading them up to have a successful life. They should not expect profits from that. The least ethically persuasive argument is that which supports adult children owing their parents. While it could be said that they are morally obligated to, it seems immoral to force a responsibility on a grown child that they did not accept unto themselves. Parents are expected to take care of their children, bring them up and set them up for success. It's an expectation. It's not a give and take when you raise a child. An explanation on that is, while many parents expect their children to grow and flourish in the future with no expectation of a return on that success. Some think they are entitled to a return. Entitled parents can lead to a bad relationship with the children that they raise, possibly planting bad seeds in future generations. Maybe creating narcissism in future generations because of the weight that is held. They feel a need to push out the negative energy to others because they have so much weight from their parents that the parents did not take off of them. Agree or disagree with Arthur's argument? I agree with Jane English's argument. There may be some situations where a grown child should provide their parents morally, but strictly speaking, a child that lives to adulthood never owes their parents a thing. Whether the relationship was parasitic, perfect, nurturing, or any other type, the child can give back what they want, nothing more or less. My personal thoughts on this ethical issue. I personally believe that children who are grown into a loving family, one that truly sets up for a successful path in life, should give back to their parents by the means of a healthy communication and a beautiful relationship. But just because they should doesn't mean they have to. I am 17. Soon I'll be leaving my parents as well. I don't feel burdened by a debt or held down by any promise, as it should be. I will give back to my parents because I want to, not because I should or need to. They raised me to be an intelligent, kind, and adventurous person, and I can't thank them enough for that. I understand that parents sometimes feel they are entitled, but it's never truly up to them. The children has the child has all the control once they begin adulthood. I believe that the next generation should not be burdened by their parents so they can reach their max potential. I feel that it is morally right to give your children all the freedom in the world so they can give back to their parents. It's not about owing your parents, but so that they have the opportunity to give back. Because when you place a debt on your child, it feels like an assignment or a task, like you must give back. That is not how I feel it should work. Works cited page.